Good morning and Assalamualaikum everyone. I hope everyone is in a good health today. We are in our second day of ICSTEM 2021. To the participants, our team has provided an attendance form in the chat box. Please fill in the attendance form. On our first day of ICSTEM 2021, we have had oral and poster presentations from the presenters. Congratulations to those oral presenters that have done with the presentations. We will begin our conference today with a speech from our second keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Valerie Ackerson from Indiana University, United States of America. Professor Dr. Valerie will deliver her speech entitled, "Is it STEM or is it Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics, Going Beyond Disciplinary Instruction?" I will pass the microphone to Associate Professor Dr. Laili Haji Cik Ros as the moderator for the session. The stage is yours, Dr. Laili.
Okay, thank you, Farah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi and good day, everybody. I would like to welcome again all of you to the second day ICSTEM 2021. And we are now live in conference WebEx, FB and YouTube of official UMT. We have come to the second day keynote address for ICSTEM 2021. But before that, my name is Associate Professor Dr. Laili Cik Ros, a Director of STEM Foundation, University Malaysia Terengganu, UMT. And today, I will be a moderator for this keynote session. We are honored to have our second keynote speaker this morning. She is here with us right now, live from USA. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Valerie Ackerson to the ICSTEM 2021. How are you, Professor?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm just really so excited. So hello everybody. It's great to see you.
Okay, hello. And then it is currently 8:15 a.m. in Malaysia, Prof. And I assume it is 8:15 p.m.
Yes.
And in US. And so that is 12-hour different between us. And
Yes.
I truly appreciate you for taking some time out of your day to join us for this event.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay, Prof. Okay. Before we start the session, let me introduce a little bit about Professor Valerie. Professor Valerie obtained her PhD in year 1997 from Oregon State University, Corvallis. Major in science education and minor in integrated science. One of her many achievements is she was awarded NAS 2021 Distinguished Contributions Through Research Award. This is the highest award that NAS, a global organization for improving science education through research. Now, Professor Valerie is a professor of science education at Indiana University, Bloomington. Her scholarship focuses on early childhood and elementary teachers' conceptions of the nature science. Her research has been published in top journals such as Journal of Research in Science Teaching, Science Education, International Journal of Science Education, and many more. And also, she has published several books in science education. The latest one, Prof, she has published a very interesting book entitled Science Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic, Tales from the Front Lines. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Valerie Ackerson to deliver her keynote address entitled, "Is it STEM, STEM, or it is Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics, Going Beyond Disciplinary Instruction?" The floor is yours, Prof. You are given about 40 minutes and the audience can ask questions afterwards.
Thank you very much. There we go.
So we can share your slides.
Yeah, I think it's coming on.
Our technical will share your slide, Prof.
Let's see if I can get it.
Wait a moment. Our technical try to share the slides now. Okay.
It looks like it's trying to load.
Yes,
It's trying.
Yeah, we try again. Okay, now. Okay.
There it is. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, you that there's my title there that you had read. So I'd like to see whether we want to talk about STEM as STEM itself, a one thing, or STEM as 4 different disciplines that are connected in some meaningful way. So next slide, please. So what is STEM and why thinking about the nature of STEM? So there's a lot of a discussion, at least that I'm aware of here, that STEM doesn't have a common definition. So people don't agree necessarily on what it really means to be STEM. And sometimes they call it STEM, sometimes they add art and it's STEAM. Sometimes it's called STREAM, where they add reading in there. So they have reading and art or some other acronym. And so it makes some people wonder whether they're just doing that for attention or if it's meaningful. And I've read some books where it talks about STEM being very important for the economy, which I don't disagree with. But what would be the result of producing a lot of extra STEM people? STEM education, some people say, prepares people for future careers. But then there's the other side that says, what about learning science to become scientifically literate? Not necessarily only to have a career, but to be able to have everyone have scientific literacy. Some people have said that STEM is a buzzword, and basically people just call something STEM, but they're still just doing science if they're a science educator, or math if they're a math educator, and they call it STEM so that they can get extra money for their projects. That's the cynical view. But who should be preparing teachers to teach STEM, and who should be teaching STEM? So I know myself, I never took an engineering class, and yet I am supposed to be teaching my future teachers to do engineering in their classes. So it's so sort of difficult to do that without any preparation myself, although all of us, we can figure things out, but are we doing it in a good fashion, or are we just trying to do the best we can, which is what probably we always do. So I thought my colleagues and I looked into different natures of the STEM disciplines to try to see whether we could conceptualize one view of STEM. So next slide, please. So the first one, I'm just going to go in order of STEM. Not because I'm a science educator did I put science first, but science because STEM, the S in STEM. So nature of science, what is the nature of scientific knowledge? So according to Letterman 2014, nature of science are the values and assumptions that are part of scientific knowledge and that also create scientific knowledge. It's the characteristics of that knowledge that result from typical conventional approaches to creating scientific knowledge, like scientific inquiry. And then in the US, we also sometimes call it scientific practices. So they're kind of the same thing, but they're the ways that scientists create that knowledge. The primary reason in my mind for incorporating nature of science in the curriculum is to help our students understand the sources of scientific knowledge, the limits and the characteristics of that scientific knowledge so they can make informed decisions about their personal and society problems that are based on science, so that they can understand the science well enough that they can make informed decisions for themselves and for others in society and other problems in society. So it's more related to scientific literacy, not necessarily a career path. So next slide, please. So the characteristics about science and scientific knowledge that are considered nature of science, that are the uncontested ones most people will accept, are the distinction between observation and inference, that the characteristics of science requires observation of data and then making inferences of that data. So you're interpreting the data. So the data don't really speak for themselves. You yourself adds meaning to that. And similarly, the distinction between scientific laws and theories. So scientific laws meaning the patterns that you see in nature. A lot of times they are mathematical formulas, and then the scientific theories that seek to explain those scientific laws. Of course, science is empirically based. You have to collect data, and then you again make observations of that data and inferences of that data. Scientific knowledge is a part of human inference, human imagination, and creativity. So scientists imagine what the data might mean. They create scientific understanding from the data, which leads to the next one. It is more subjective than objective, although scientists try to be objective. They have background knowledge and thankfully that help them make good interpretations of that data. So all the data they look at is subjected to what they already know and what they expect they're going to find. So they interpret the data based on what their theory leads them to see. Socially and culturally embedded. So in different social and cultural contexts, you might have different interpretations of data or reasonable interpretations of data. I remember doing an activity with third graders where they had to interpret data and something that they couldn't see, and they all thought it was a little toy car, but most adults wouldn't have thought that. So it's even culture within a culture, like a subculture. So kids might interpret data differently from adults based on their own background knowledge. And the last one is that even though science is very reliable, it can change if you reinterpret your data or you collect new data that you rethink about and you make a different claim about your science. So it's not going to change overnight, but it does change, and it can change, and it should change when we get more information. All right, next slide, please. So what about the nature of technology? So just like every one of these letters or disciplines, so this is the T in STEM, scholars are not consistent on the definition of technology, but they still have some common definitions that they find. And in the Wahab et al. 2012, they've recognized that there should be some physical product in technology. You should also develop knowledge and skills for using that pieces of technology, the knowledge about technology and the skills for the use of that technology, and then experience and approach of applying that technology to a problem or some kind of use that a human might need. And it's generally organized into systems. Arthur, in his book called The Nature of Technology, identified technology as an orchestration of phenomena that are programmed for a useful purpose. And so the technology is organized around a concept or principle, and then it is built into a physical form. So it always is to solve some kind of problem or to help make things more easy for the user. So next slide, please. And the nature of technology, some critical ideas, according to Cruz in 2013, is that you have to identify what the technology is. So you have to be able to understand what it is. And then the progress, the technological progress, and then realize that technology is not neutral. It can be good, it can be bad, and there are limitations. And some of those limitations are technological trade-offs. So you might have a great piece of technology, but it may impact something such as your environment or something like that. So it's not, technology is not always perfect. There's our interactions between the technology and the culture. Next slide, please. So there's a curriculum aspect to the nature of technology, and multiple organizations, at least in the United States, do provide curriculum standards for technology instruction, but they don't require teachers to include them. So schools and teachers don't have to teach about technology, but the technology standards are there. So it's different from science standards or math standards where the standards are there and you have to teach them because there's a test about them. So there's 3 different ones that are the main ones in the United States. So the International Society of Technology and Education, which used to be just the National Education Technology Standards. So I don't know if it's gone international because they changed their name. There's also the ITTEEA, which is another acronym for another society. And then the Computer Science Teachers Association, which is just one part of technology. So the technology curriculum standards are broken down, again, into technology literacy and computer science. But there's a focus that is much stronger on helping students learn how to use technology rather than understanding the nature of technology as a way of knowing. So next slide. And then we come to the E in STEM. So nature of engineering. Engineering has a lot of definitions, just like the other disciplines, and no one really agrees on one solid single definition. But from the National Academy of Engineering, it is considered a process for creating the human-made world, the artifacts and processes that never existed before. And then from DIM in 2005, called it a systematic, intelligent process where designers generate, evaluate, specify concepts for devices, systems, processes, and function, and they achieve the client's needs while satisfying a design constraint. So there's not unlimited resources. You have to design something within a limited amount of resources or funding or something like that. So there are proposed engineering standards. However, you can see the year is 2009, and those engineering standards still haven't been put in the curriculum. But those engineering standards comprise knowledge of engineering and then the skills that you need to undertake in order to be an engineer. So designing under those constraints of funding or materials, using the tools, and then having the use of different materials and also mathematics skills. And then the habits of mind that you need as an engineer in order to figure out resolutions for problems and design. Next slide, please. So the nature of engineering were first included in the United States national standards in 2011, but they were not their own standards. They were included in the science standards. And they were comprised of cross-cutting concepts that were proposed by the National Academy of Engineering rather than standalone standards put inside of the science standards. So we do have them in there. So when we're science teachers or science teacher educators preparing science teachers, we are responsible for including engineering in our classes. And so while it's important to include that, there is a difference between engineering, technology, and science. And so it does have a little bit of, it makes a little bit of a struggle for a teacher if they're not prepared for that. So engineering design, which is an approach to solving or achieving goals, technology, which is, it's fundamental to human culture. It's not just computers or tech or electronic technology. And a pencil can be considered a piece of technology and has been in the past. And then science and engineering are different in terms of their goals, processes, and products. For a scientist, they might just want to create an understanding of a phenomenon in the natural world, but an engineer generally wants to resolve a problem. So they're different, and so it does take different approaches. The challenge for us in the United States is also difficult because we have 50 states, and of course there's no uniformity in any of the states. We don't have the same standards necessarily in all the states, although we do have national standards. It's the state's decision whether or not they want to adopt those national standards. But most people do agree it should include the big ideas for engineering to identify problems, know a design process, be able to design under constraints, solve problems, and then continues testing and revising models that can solve problems. So next slide, please. So what about mathematics? So for the nature of mathematics, the M in STEM, there were two main philosophical views, the fallibilists and the absolutists. So the fallibilists mainly considers that that mathematics can change, and it's a human construct, which the absolutists feel like more like it is a set process. So some ideas in the nature of pure maths from Pear, which was a fallibilist, is that mathematical practice and ideas are part of cultural identity. So mathematical ideas can be part of culture, and mathematical knowledge is dynamic and also changed or subject to modification, just like science is. Excuse me. And mathematical inquiry is an exploration of mathematical ideas. So they have an inquiry process as well as science does. And then ideas are tested through social argumentation, which we do have in science, also scientific argumentation. So I've found more similarities here than I did in the other disciplines to science. Students should be able to construct viable arguments and critique the reasons of others. That is a big thing from our Common Core standards, which is pretty much adopted across the United States. And mathematical literacy includes having an understanding and appreciation of mathematics as a cultural and intellectual achievement, meaning that we should know that humans actually do this. So many teachers, though, at least in the US, retain their absolutist ideas, which gives the idea if they teach, do a lot of calculations, you don't understand that there's a humanist outlook. And so students are more focused on calculations rather than sort of understanding the whole nature of mathematics as part of what they learn. Next slide, please. So then thinking about the nature of all the individual disciplines, is there really a nature of STEM? Is STEM a thing in itself? So from my viewpoint, STEM is a socially constructed label that, at least in the US, it feels like it's a response to economic and global pressure. Like the STEMs are more specialized field. And so if you are one of the STEM, it's kind of a good thing. But on the other hand, it's always existed, but we just put a name to it, I guess, is my sort of sense, because they always have existed as individual disciplines, but they all do influence and build on each other. We put a name to it as we combine the disciplines, and it can help, actually, I think can help teaching all the four disciplines actually be more meaningful, because you can combine the disciplines and show how they're connected. But on the other hand, does calling it STEM change what we actually really do in terms of the field? If you're teaching a math lesson and you call it a STEM lesson, is it different because you called it STEM than if you called it math, if you don't make any changes? And the same thing with science. If you're teaching a science lesson and you call it a STEM lesson, does it make a difference? But my main idea in my head is that if we're going to call it STEM, then there should be some kind of interdependence of the individual disciplines so that students can see how they influence each other. So they can see how scientists use mathematics, and mathematics can be a human activity, and how technology can help with solving problems, and it all can be used in an engineering. So teaching STEM in at least what we've looked at currently here in the US is that means that one subject is most put forward, and the other things might be sort of secondary. So if you're a science educator like me, you might design a STEM lesson, but science is at the forefront, and you kind of put in TEM, and and you still hope that the science gets the best kind of thing. So yeah, I'm looking at the chat, so it distracts me a little bit. I want to answer all the questions, but I'll finish this first. So anyway, so should it be interdisciplinary, or should it be focused on your own discipline and then make connections to the other disciplines? Next slide, please. So implications for science, technology, engineering, math education. At least here in the US, we're it's called to teach STEM. I know that a lot of people have said, oh, you have to teach STEM. Okay, but it's not a real discipline. It's a comprisal of 4 disciplines together. So how do we teach STEM in a fair way to all the disciplines, and in a way that all students can learn those 4 disciplines? So teachers, and I don't know if it's the same in Malaysia, but teachers and university professors who are teacher educators generally have a discipline specialty. So for me, it's science education. For my colleagues down the hall, it's math education. For my colleagues on the second floor below me, it is technology education. And there is no engineering education at IU. And rarely do any of us take an engineering course. So even though we have to teach it, we're doing the best we can. I'm not sure that we teach it the way someone who had the knowledge would be teaching it, if they had an engineering background. So without the knowledge of the natures of these disciplines and all the connections and influences, how can we really do a fair job of teaching STEM? And how can teacher educators prepare students, their own future teachers, to be able to do so with their students? And I'm wondering, these are my wonderings on this page. I'm wondering whether anyone has a deep conceptualization of all of these disciplines in such ways that they can make really meaningful integrations and connections across the S, the T, the E, and the M, and just really have that deep of an understanding. And another wondering, shouldn't a science teacher be very good at teaching science and then maybe making connections to other disciplines, but not only those in STEM, like maybe also literacy? But then we'd have to have a new acronym. Anyway, I think that other people are much better at teaching mathematics than me, but if we maybe work together, possibly we could do a better job at teaching STEM in our university. And the last wondering is, why is it so popular to teach STEM instead of teaching disciplines on their own? And I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it seems like there could be more of a balance, at least where I live. And next slide, please. And so toward the end here, does calling it STEM change what we do? And does calling it STEM change what and how we teach? Is there really a STEM, or are we really still teaching science, technology, engineering, and math? But how about connecting it meaningfully to those other disciplines through interdisciplinary teaching? What are the benefits of teaching STEM? Do they outweigh the benefits of strong disciplinary teaching? Or I've seen some research saying that if you only focus on STEM and not the disciplines, then you might lose content. However, what if you taught really well a STEM, and would that improve content of it? I would be very interested in your reactions and feedback and questions, because my presentation was a lot of questions about STEM, and I'm interested in what you all have to say and think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Valerie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay. So, as we allow the participants to ask the question, so can we read some of the question, Prof? Okay. So one of the question here, okay. Perhaps we are too obsessed with buzzwords and acronyms. I have the same question to Prof. Valerie. Okay, let me see the question. One of the question from Mr. Dr. Koo, yeah. Hi, good morning. I'm Dr. Koo, an instructional coach, okay, from PPD Coaching. My question for our invited speaker today, Prof. Valerie, is what advice do you give for district education departments to achieve goals in STEM education? Do you agree that science and mathematics discipline is the core of STEM education?
Actually, I do, and I'm probably biased. If I were an engineering educator, I might say engineering is the core. But I do think that, especially in the United States, there's no tests for technology, there's no tests for engineering. So because you want your students to do well on the test, you really have to focus mostly on the science and math to help them be successful. And I know that's not a very good answer, but you do have to help prepare the students for their success. But I don't think that engineering and technology is not important. But I would think that science and math, probably at least in the United States, are the core subjects.
And then, do you agree, Prof, that science and mathematics discipline is the core of STEM education?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. And then, okay. Okay, let me see another question. I can see before this, we have one question from Mr. Azman. Okay, Prof. Valerie, how strong is the drive to STEM education in the States?
It's very strong. It almost seems like it's pressure to do STEM, which is not a bad thing because I think doing STEM is important. I just need to have more definition of what doing STEM means. Does it mean focusing on one of the letters, and I'm just saying it that way just because one of the disciplines, or does it mean something more? So I don't know if they're calling it in the United States something STEM just to focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, or if they want us to be doing something that combines all of them. I don't know if it's different from where you are, but it's very much a push for
Yeah.
STEM.
And then
And
is
in
there
fact,
any, yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to mention some of my colleagues who are not STEM feel a little bit outside because they don't have the same opportunities, like in terms of grant funding and such, because they're not in the STEM field, so they kind of don't like STEM. So
And
sort
then,
of interesting.
is there any initiative from the federal government for the schools to achieve a certain percentage of STEM-based students against non-STEM-based?
I don't think there's a percentage like that, but there is a push that schools become STEM certified schools so that the schools around the United States, there's like extra money if you go through the process to certify your school to become a STEM certified, meaning it focuses mostly on STEM, no matter what the grade level is. It can be from elementary to through high school. But I don't think there's a percentage like you have to have so many people become STEM graduates, but there's an emphasis on creating STEM schools so that more students are that.
Okay, and one more, Prof, before we end. Could
Sure.
you share the strategies used by the schools to encourage students to take up STEM-based courses?
I think it's probably a little bit being STEM schools, like so if the schools go through a process to become STEM certified, then students will be more will receive that kind of instruction more. So they will have more STEM lessons.
Okay, since we still have another 10 minutes, Prof, so we allow for more question, I think.
Sure.
So is it okay for you?
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I'm having a great time.
yeah. Um, okay, Prof Valerie, what advice do you give for district education department to achieve goals in STEM education? Or this is the same question just now? Okay.
I don't know if it's the same question, but I don't even know if I have advice for it.
Yeah. Okay, to link all the disciplines, okay, of STEM, Prof, can be challenging. Do you think that the current science curriculum pedagogy successfully relates the various sub-disciplines of science?
I think it depends on which curriculum you're using. So I think I'm not sure there is a good curriculum that combines all of the STEM disciplines. There may be, but I'm not aware of it. Most of them kind of focus on one of the disciplines. So in science, we might have a curriculum that focuses on science, but might try to make connections to technology, engineering, and math. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question correctly.
Okay, and then hi and good morning. My question is, okay, is there any way how to implement STEM education, STEM education with the time constraint?
That is another really good question because there are so many time constraints for teachers, they have a hard time fitting in disciplinary instruction, let alone interdisciplinary. Although if they were well trained in the beginning, they could save time that way. But it's hard to learn it once you already are teaching disciplinary separately, and then you're trying to focus on also adding all those connections. So I wish there was a good way, and I think we should try to figure out a good way to overcome those time constraints.
Yeah, because as a teachers, we need to achieve the syllabus objective with a
Right.
certain time frame given, right, Prof?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one more question I can see here. Okay, what is your opinion? Do we need to continue to use STEM terminology, or we go back before the term STEM being introduced? Is it together or just individual, Prof?
I think actually I like STEM together, but I want it to be more meaningful than just me calling it STEM and just teaching science the same way. So I think there are connections among the disciplines that can be very meaningful and can provide purpose and like in a problem solving way to incorporate all the disciplines. I think it's great, but I think oftentimes, at least what I see at schools here in the US, I'm not talking about anywhere else in the world, but here people will say they're teaching STEM and it's a math lesson. So I don't know that it's really changed anything, even though I think the intention for it is good.
Okay, so I think thank you so much, Prof. Valerie, for such an interesting talk. We would definitely benefit from your sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, take care.
And then, okay, there is no more question. I would like to end this session by giving a big round of applause to Professor Dr. Valerie for her keynote address. Okay, with that, I would like to close this session and hand over to Farah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you to Professor Dr. Valerie Ackerson and Associate Professor Dr. Laili Chitrose for a wonderful session. With the Professor Dr. Valerie here with us today, let us all cherish the moment by taking photos together. All guests are invited to switch on your camera for the photography session. In count of 1 to 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, one last shot. Freestyle. One more. All right, thank you so much. To move on to our next agenda, oral presenters are welcome to enter your respective rooms for your presentations. For attendees, you are welcome to any room according to the selected themes to watch the presentations, and also to the ICSTEM websites to view all the posters available there. With that, I wish all the presenters good luck and happy conferencing to all the attendees as well.